Greetings and welcome. I'm Max Parthas, founding member and national campaign coordinator for the Abolish Slavery National Network. Passed by Congress on January 31st, 1865, and ratified on December 6, 1865, we have been taught that the 13th Amendment abolished slavery in the United States. It has been described as a final constitutional solution to the issue of slavery. This is not the truth and never has been. As of the week of 2024, legalized slavery has persisted in the United States for another 159 years using a number of different names, under a plethora of different disguises and skins, from convict leasing to sharecropping, to debt peonage, to mass incarceration, to private prisons, and now warehousing bodies for profit and control. Slavery is alive in practice and protected as an institution by the federal constitution and 18 remaining state constitutions. This subjugation of a population allowed as a punishment for any alleged crime, resulting in the largest prison population to have ever existed on planet Earth, a race and class-based system of oppression birthed in the hateful, vengeful, and racist aftermath of a civil war known as Reconstruction. Slavery was not abolished. It was reformed, taking away the right of the individual to own people as property and giving that power to the state. In stark violation of international human rights agreements and our own constitutional assumptions, human beings are still being turned into property to be owned and operated, worked for free under threat of punishment, traded on the open market in the form of prison stocks and jail bonds, criminalized, dehumanized, and hunted for profit and control. Our justice system has become a revenue generator, and our prisons are an economic development program, all at the cost of human lives and freedoms. Ask yourself, how is it possible that the 13th Amendment was a final constitutional solution when 7 states have abolished slavery for the first time in their history, starting with Colorado in 2018? How did the 13th Amendment abolish slavery in the United States when over 18 states are organized to abolish existing slavery exception clauses in 2024? If slavery was abolished, as we have all been taught, then why is there a joint federal resolution on the table in 2024 to repeal the 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery without exception? What we are doing here today, and have done successfully in 7 states since 2018, is the final solution to the issue of slavery. Through the power of state-by-state voter initiatives and a federal joint resolution, we will end it both in law and in practice forever. We are the Abolish Slavery National Network, and this is the class of 2024 and beyond.
My name is Johnny Perez. I work as the Director of U.S. Prison Programs for the National Religious Campaign Against Torture, and I'm also a slavery abolitionist. Today, I want to talk to you about the critical issue of forced slavery through the lens of the End the Exception campaign. Both of these pivotal pieces of legislation, Senate Joint Resolution 33, House Joint Resolution 72, together make the Abolition Amendment. All across this country, there are people who are forced into labor just because they're incarcerated. During my incarceration, I was forced to work for 17 cents an hour under the threat of being placed inside of solitary confinement, which is 23 hours, locked in a cell with no windows, little to no human contact. In my own experience, I worked for all of my 20s, sewing sheets, pillowcases, boxers, for 17 cents an hour, with no days off, no bereavement time, no vacation time, and little ability to save or send money home to my family, which I left behind. We send people to prison as punishment and not for punishment. And that's why the Abolition Amendment needs to be passed.
Hi, I'm Margot Kirchner, and I'm an abolitionist. I head the Wisconsin Justice Initiative and WJI Action, which are nonprofits that educate the public about Wisconsin's justice system and advocate for progressive change to improve the outcomes of those in the system, their families, and the community. In 1854, the Wisconsin Supreme Court declared the Federal Fugitive Slave Act unconstitutional, and it later defied the U.S. Supreme Court on the same issue. Yet today, Wisconsin's Constitution still contains a provision permitting slavery for those convicted of crime. We must amend our Constitution to eliminate that provision and ban slavery in any form and in all circumstances.
My name is Sean Darling. I am the lead organizer for Abolish Slavery Maine, and I am a slavery abolitionist. I am currently campaigning to add language to the Maine State Constitution to prohibit the practice of slavery and involuntary servitude as legally permitted by the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. I stand in solidarity with my fellow organizers across the U.S. who are working to add such language to their state constitutions or who are working to remove exception clauses to their own state constitution. Further, I support the federal effort to pass the Abolition Amendment to repeal and replace the exception clause of the 13th Amendment to disallow slavery or voluntary servitude for punishment for a crime.
Hi, my name is Sarah and I represent Abolish Slavery National Network in DC. I'm a slavery abolitionist. DC is the beating heart of our nation. It's our nation's capital, supposedly the freest nation in the world. Yet, slavery is still legal here. We'd love to have your support to finally ending the exception to finally abolishing slavery here in DC once and for all.
Hello, my name is Walisha Wilson and I am the president of the Georgia chapter of All of Us or None. Incarcerated Georgians get paid zero to produce billions in goods and services. We're not protected by unions and we don't receive any safety gear and we're punished when we refuse to work. The current Georgia law states that there shall be no involuntary servitude in the state of Georgia except as a punishment for crime. It is our goal in our current campaign to end slavery in Georgia to have the law amended to say that there shall be no involuntary servitude in the state of Georgia, period.
My name is Antoine Henshaw. In slavery in New Jersey. I am an abolitionist. Right now, we're dealing with the dubious nature of the institution of slavery being imposed on our youth in our state and parole violators. Currently, it costs $608,000 a year to incarcerate one of our youth for a year, and it costs $53,000 a year to incarcerate an adult. They're paying for it on the back end, and this funding could be used towards the liberation of our people in our community as a public health initiative instead of a public safety threat.
My name is Pat Gately, and I'm a slavery abolitionist serving as the lead organizer for the Abolish Slavery Kentucky campaign. Because many Kentuckians do not know that slavery is legal here, Abolish Slavery Kentucky does a lot of education. We table at events where we can network while we educate, and we provide tools and encouragement for contacting elected officials. We also do presentations, lead discussions, and answer questions about why slavery is still in our Constitution and what we need to do to change that. We're building a coalition of partners and hope to see an option to strike the exception clause on our next ballot.
Good afternoon and good morning. My name is Kamal Allen. I am a founding member of the Abolish Slavery National Network, former lead organizer and current board member of this amazing organization. And today I'm going to be talking with you about the history of our movement and how we came to be. So I always like to preface that we, as ASNN, the Abolish Slavery National Network, we did not start this movement. I truly believe that the abolition movement began the moment that our ancestors were forced into bondage. that this abolition movement began the moment that our ancestors decided that freedom or death is better than being in captivity and in bondage. And so throughout the course of history, beginning from 1619 and even before 1619 until now, we have witnessed an ongoing existence of slavery and a resistance to it. Slavery built the economic and political and legal foundation of this country. It is, in my opinion, one of the most important events in human history. It is earth-shattering how many people were forced into captivity, how many people were tortured and enslaved. The 13th Amendment, as Max had referred to earlier, did not, in fact, abolish this practice. It abolished the practice of chattel slavery. But shortly after the abolition of chattel slavery, this loophole which states, except as punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, slavery shall not exist. And through this loophole, what was once chattel slavery was transferred to slavery inside of prisons, where people, if they were convicted of a crime, could be forced into bondage and into involuntary servitude, wherein they could be forced to work and have all of their rights, privileges, and autonomies stripped away from them. And we've seen this loophole exploited in the past. We know that this is not benign. As the former lead organizer of the Colorado campaign back in 2018, we had always stated that there is nothing unintentional about what is in our Constitution. Our Constitution is our founding document, whether if you are referring to the federal government or a state government. Your Constitution outlines and dictates the role of government and the contours of the law in which they can be created and interpreted. And because of that, a loophole that allows for slavery to exist is deeply harmful and threatening to our freedoms, our safety, and our autonomy, and our right to exist. This 13th Amendment didn't exist just in our federal Constitution, as many of you already know, but that language had spread to multiple state constitutions throughout the United States. Nearly half of the states in the United States have language that say slavery is abolished except as punishment for a crime. And the other half of the states defer to the 13th Amendment, where that exception still. Long story short, the slavery exception exists where you are, unless you are part of the 7 states that have abolished it entirely. Well, what do we do now that this loophole exists? What do we do now that we know that slavery is still alive and well in the United States, both in practice and in legal provision? We abolish it. The Abolish Slavery National Network had its seeds and foundations throughout various different states, including my own in the state of Colorado. And in 2018, we led a campaign successfully abolishing the loophole for slavery and involuntary servitude, and we were the first state in the union to do both in 2018. And now, following the victory of 2018, we received calls from different organizers from different states, particularly from Utah, South Carolina, California, New Jersey, and others that you've heard from previously. And from these different calls, we decided to come together as a national network. We decided that if we're leading a campaign on this coast and other people are leading a campaign on this coast, that together we could share resources, share knowledge about this issue, and eventually put an end to this practice. And on August 28th, 2020, some of our wildest dreams came true. We formally created the Abolish Slavery National Network. Our mission is very clear. We're here to not only close that loophole permanently, but to put an end to this long practice. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our ancestors, we owe it to our communities to do this. And since our founding in 2020, other states have followed suit, including Utah, Nebraska, and Tennessee, Vermont, Oregon, and Alabama. And this victory, this victory is not stopping here. I'm truly blessed to be in the presence of these amazing organizers. I'm truly blessed to have you, the person viewing, as a part of this long journey for freedom. And with that, I want to thank you and enjoy the show.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jamelia Land. I am proud to be here today and serve also as one of the founding members of the Abolish Slavery National Network and currently serve as the director of post-election campaigns. Today, I am honored and pleased to announce to you all the states that are currently, seeking to be ballot measures in 2024. But before I go there, I would like to share a little something with you. That the practice of involuntary servitude is a blight on our society, a remnant of an era of injustice that has no place in our present. As we continue to learn more about this unconscionable practice, it is vital that Californians, as well as everyone else in the nation, stand together and demand its abolition. The evidence of involuntary servitude's immoral nature and detritus impact on communities across the country is overwhelming. Involuntary servitude preys on those who are most vulnerable, exploiting the weak and marginalized for personal gain. This practice has deep roots in historical systems of oppressions that have wreaked havoc on communities of color. Today, it continues to perpetuate cycles of poverty, violence, and trauma for countless families and individuals. The moral imperative to end involuntary servitude is clear. No person should be forced into labor against their will, nor should they be subjected to the inhumane conditions often associated with this practice. Furthermore, it is our collective responsibility as citizens of the United States of America to ensure that all members of our communities are treated with dignity and respect. The time to act is now. As more evidence comes to light, it becomes increasingly apparent that involuntary servitude is not only morally reprehensible, but also has serious consequences for our society as a whole. By allowing this practice to continue, we perpetuate cycles of violence and dehumanization that have no place in our state or our country. I'm speaking today to you from California, where our bill is ACA 8, the End Slavery in California Act. I implore that Californians must come together and demand an end to involuntary servitude. This means advocating for policy changes at the local, state, and federal levels, as well as supporting organizations that are working tirelessly to combat this practice, such as the Abolish Slavery National Network. We must also recognize the ways in which our own behaviors and actions may contribute to these systems of oppression and take steps to change them. It is essential that Californians donate their resources and volunteer their time to organizations working to abolish involuntary servitude. This includes contributing to legal funds for those who have been victimized by this practice, as well as supporting community-based initiatives that aim to address its root causes. The movement to end involuntary servitude is gaining momentum, but it will require continued effort and commitment from Californians as well as every citizen across this nation. We must not rest until this immoral practice is abolished once and for all. Involuntary servitude has no place in our society. Its impact on communities of color and vulnerable populations is undeniable, and its perpetuation must be met with collective outrage and actions. As a citizen of the United States of America, as a citizen of the state of California, we have a moral imperative to stand up for justice and demand an end to this cruel and immoral practice. So today I would like to let you know that in addition to California, there are a total of 18 states that are all seeking to remove involuntary servitude from their respective states' constitutions. Those states are California, Georgia, Kentucky. Kentucky's legislation is HB 295, SR 117. Louisiana, which is currently organizing. Arkansas, HJR 1013. Michigan, HIJRG. Nevada is on the ballot for 2024 as a joint resolution 10. New Jersey, New York, Senate Bill S225B. North Carolina, House Bill 822. Ohio, Senate Study Bill 1144. Texas, SJR 89, HJR 63. Virginia, Wisconsin, SJR 95, Assembly JR 102. New Hampshire, who has recently unanimously passed their first committee, NHCACR 13, Missouri, Iowa, Senate Study Bill 1144, and Washington, D.C. Again, that is 18 states in the Union that are all seeking to end legalized constitutional slavery in their respective states' constitutions. In addition to that, I would also like to say that we are currently working with U.S. Congress member Jeff Merkley as well as Nikema Williams on Senate Joint Resolution 53, a joint resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States to prohibit the use of slavery and involuntary servitude as punishment for a crime. As Director of Post-Election Campaigns, I am very pleased to announce that we are working with multiple states. Most recently, some of you may have seen in the news about what is happening in Alabama. Alabama is one of the states that is also looking as we can only say it is modern day slavery. What is currently happening, the labor exploitation that goes on in these prisons across the country go far beyond what the Constitution allows. The racially discriminatory punishment that is oftentimes exercised on the people that are inside of these facilities. And I want to be very clear, language is important. These are not prisoners. These are not inmates. These are incarcerated human beings. And though there is a lot of conversation around the country right now about fair wages, I want to be very clear that this is not about wages, that there are legislations occurring all around the country to deal with with the wage issue. This is a humanitarian effort. You must remember that we live in a country that the Constitution states that we are 3/5 of a human being for purposes of representation. Oftentimes that representation is in a socially constructed entity that our lives have no value unless we are directly tied to that economic engine. And oftentimes we are the commodity. And so we here at the Abolish Slavery National Network, we are very, very pleased and very proud of all of the states and all of the people around the country who continue to organize to push back against legalized slavery. And let's be very clear. The Constitution, not only in California and the federal Constitution and so many across this country, state very clearly that slavery nor involuntary servitude shall be permitted except for a punishment of a crime. So it is time for us to end that exception. Thank you.
Good day, family. My name is Dennis Febo, and I'm the lead organizer for the Abolish Slavery National Network, beginning now in 2024. Thank you, family, for sharing so much information. I wanted to just really reiterate what moves our organization, and that is for the reestablishment of the rights of human beings and of our communities and our people. Many people aren't aware of the difference between human and civil rights, and especially in the United States, where these issues aren't necessarily brought up in common conversation. What is a civil right? And when we look at our civil rights and where they're delineated in the U.S. Constitution, the 13th Amendment has an exception that allows U.S. government, state governments, and anyone convicting someone of a crime to utilize slavery and involuntary servitude as punishment. And this has been a big question. Many in our community know what we don't want justice to look like. And now the conversation has become, what should it look like? for all of the effort and all of the funding that is established inside of the carceral system of the United States and now as a global phenomenon. A lot of the issues that are found in our community that lead to what we call mass incarceration could be resolved if the amount of economic input was diverted into community efforts and into establishing real rehabilitative programs, education, and services. Could we create a justice system that allows for true rehabilitation without the need to propertize the human body, without the need to remove humanity from a human body, without the need to continue this story that we've continued since the beginning of the foundation of this country, whether or not a human being should be a commodity? Moving forward, 2024 as ASNN, the Abolish Slavery National Network is now independent entities as a C3 foundation and C4 political action committee. We would like to publicly thank March On for being our fiscal sponsors for the past 3.5 years and being unwavering in their support towards getting our efforts moving and making sure that we can abolish slavery in different states. And as we've been successful in many states, we've also had our failures. And while all we continue to know is that it's going to take more of us to learn, to study, to understand, and know the truth, to be enraged by such truth. How could we live in a country where slavery still remains legal, even though we have a federal holiday that celebrates its ending? Now, as we establish our vision moving forward, to be clear with our people that slavery needs to end, and that is a legislative process. It requires a couple of steps, and a lot of us aren't aware of them, but it does take legislators to sponsor, it takes committees to have hearings and discussions, and it takes votes to get these on the ballot. This is a ballot campaign initiative for most of the states that are pushing to end slavery. And it'll also require that you're familiar with that process. As many of us are turned off by it, the more I've learned and the more a lot of us have learned, the more we realize how much more change, how much more impact we're going to actually be able to have in our country if we became a little bit more savvy about the language that rules and not just dictates us on the civil scale, understanding that as a human rights issue, Article 4 of the Declaration of Human Rights states that slavery or involuntary servitude are illegal in all of their forms. The 13th Amendment exception clause is a form of slavery, thus standing in antagonism to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. As we move forward, we understand that we have to move state by state to support the federal movement. As we move forward, we know that we have to support state movements in order to get to the finish line. And that is what ASNN is here for. That's why we are here. As administrators and as core team members, we're here to support any state movement that is willing to join the fight to make the mark of 38 states that would need to ratify a federal amendment in order to end, repeal, and replace the 13th and permanently abolish slavery in the United States of America. These efforts would also take ratification if we were to pass at the federal level, and the state movements would have to organize again. This is going to be an arduous and lengthy fight, but we're here for it. All of us here on this call born to know that we came to this earth to end this despicable, inhumane, ungodly practice of being able to look at human beings, especially for those of them that have more melanin and color in their skin or may speak a different tongue, for their bodies to be more of a commodity to generate a multi-billion-dollar economic engine that sustains the lives of many more. So, in order to join this effort, please visit our website, abolishslavery.us. Reach out to us if you're in a state that doesn't have a campaign. We'll help you get it going. And if you have it, are wanting to get active in a state that has a campaign, we will plug you to the right people to make sure that everyone works in tandem as a coalition to finally abolish slavery in your state and in the United States of America. Follow us more on Abolition Nation on Instagram and Facebook. I'm Dennis Febo, lead organizer here at your service. Thank you, family.
I said we have a Q&A. I'm sorry, I was on mute. We have a Q&A segment coming up right now. We have a few questions that have been commonly asked of us, and we are going to answer those, and then we will follow up with some live questions. So the first question is, isn't changing the wording in the Constitution just symbolic? I think that is the wrong question, to be honest with you. You should be asking, is the exception clause in the 13th Amendment or in your state constitution just symbolic? Because if that is not symbolic, then what we are doing is not symbolic either. We are talking about real crimes against humanity. We have 25% of the world's prison population and less than 5% of the global population. We've got the largest prison uh, population that's ever existed on planet Earth. And to be a little bit more harsh and precise, we have more black men who are in cages in the United States than the top five populated African nations do combined. So, yes, it is not symbolic. This is a real thing we're doing. We are literally ending slavery, which is legal through your constitutions, and then ending it in practice. Next question.
My name is Nathan Woodliff Stanley. I'm a founding member of ASNN and worked on the 2018 abolition campaign in Colorado along with Kamau Allen. So if, say, we do abolish it on paper, what does that change? At the deepest level, it changes everything. Slavery and involuntary servitude are crimes against humanity, and they shouldn't be allowed in our constitutions for any reason, including as a punishment for crime. Now, it's true that passing an abolition amendment isn't the end of the story. Passing a constitutional amendment doesn't instantly change laws or policies or practices on the ground, but it changes the context, the legal and constitutional context. It takes away the Constitution as a tool for slavery, and it creates new opportunities, new tools, new avenues for making changes to those laws and policies and practices. There are some people who are concerned that these amendments won't have any practical effect, but there's other people who are concerned that it will have a practical effect. And I have to say that anyone who doesn't want to abolish constitutional slavery or involuntary servitude as punishment for crime, because they're worried about how it might affect prison labor or prison practices or costs of incarceration or anything else about our criminal legal system, what they're basically saying is that they want slavery and involuntary servitude because they think we need it to make the system work. Well, that's exactly what the whole Confederacy said going into the Civil War. It was wrong then, and it's wrong today. There's plenty of room to debate different aspects of our criminal legal system. There's certainly, with respect to work programs, there's room for voluntary work programs that actually benefit people who are incarcerated and prepare for reentry and things like that. There's plenty of debate about what all of that should look like. But what we ought to be able to agree on is that whatever a criminal justice system looks like, it shouldn't be slavery and it shouldn't be involuntary servitude. And that's what this is all about.
Are we trying to abolish prisons? No, we are trying to abolish slavery, whatever that practice ends up looking like in any way, shape, or form. Are those practices found most in prisons? Yes, but the issue of slavery isn't just found in prison. There are more convicted people outside of the wall than there are convicted people behind it. The concept of slavery and involuntary servitude can precipitate in many areas of our society that aren't limited to the construct of prison. Do we believe prisons should change and reform their practices? Absolutely. And we understand that by abolishing slavery and the issue from its root, all of those other issues would have to be resolved one by one, tying to the finally being able to have a legal premise to go after these practices as what we call the badges and incidents of slavery. But no, we're not trying to abolish prisons.
That's a great question. That not everyone in prison works. How is that slavery? Um, when you have, number one, I want people to understand the history of what we are talking about here, right? That, like I stated earlier, we live in a country that says that we are 3/5 of a human being for purposes of representation. That within itself has dehumanized a large segment of our population. Also, there is a misconception that people who do work in prison, that it is the equivalent of some form of rehabilitation. That too is not correct. And there are people who do work in prisons that it is in fact slavery. And I would just like to be clear that this is not just about work, right? The fact that people bodies are being warehoused every single day. There are prisons in this country, for example, in the state of Texas, that there's no issue of wage or no question of wage because they're not paid. However, they are warehoused, their bodies are being, and that the state are receiving financial incentives just for having their bodies incarcerated. And so when you ask the question, how is it slavery because someone may not be working in a prison, the mere fact that their body is directly tied to this economic infrastructure is in fact slavery.
Thank you, Jamelia. We are going to open up for questions from the live audience if anyone has some at this point. So we'll check with our technicians here if there's any questions up. If not, we will make some final commentary and then no comments. Okay. All right. So we covered the questions that we have been getting very often here right now, getting ahead of the game. With that being said, we have a couple extra minutes because we do not have any questions from the audience. So we'll just do a final comment round robin and then finish off with our comments from Brother Nathan. So Kamal, anything you would like to say in conclusion of today's event?
Yeah, I just want to leave by saying we have already accomplished something incredible. That if somebody were to ask me 10 years ago, would we be able to abolish slavery in American society today? I would say no, the issue is too big. It's too far away. What are you talking about? Like change a constitution? Who am I? Who are we to be able to just get up and do that? And I just want to say that in following the tradition, the freedom fighting traditions of our ancestors, we have to believe that the impossible is possible. And I know that this fight is sometimes very hard, that we face opponents who are much bigger than us, who are much more well-funded than we are. But the proof is in the pudding. We have abolished slavery in multiple states already, and we have more coming. And so I just want to say, we're going to keep hope alive. We are doing an incredible job. I'm so proud of all of these organizers here. That's all that I got to say.
Thank you, Kamal. Brother Dennis Febo, lead organizer.
I'd like to wholeheartedly concur with Brother Kamal. For us, when we first started this fight, there was this background fear that this was too big, that this was something that we really couldn't impact. And in the past 5 years, all of the victories and all of the hearts that we've changed and all the realizations that have been made, all of the findings, all of the learning, all of that has been very, very, very important. And I know it has moved the needle, I think, for the next generation. As much as people may not really truly understand this issue, we've already made a lot of progress. We've moved the needle. If for some reason, and God forbid, we couldn't finish this in our lifetime, We're at least continuing what we understood our ancestors did. We're just a revival of the American Anti-Slavery Society. We're just a revival of what was already done. The foundation of this history leans more into the abolitionist movement because our country wouldn't be where it's at if it wasn't for them to uphold the ideals of God and the Bible and the spiritual practice and being able to recognize each other as spiritual beings without removing our humanity from each other. We are living in the land of the free, then there should be no exceptions. And if we are the home and the brave, I hope you're brave enough to stand up against any of these injustices. Blessings, family.
Thank you, Dennis. Sister Jamelia, final comments.
Oh, my apologies. I saw we were having a little bit of a tech issue. So I actually want to give some shout outs, if that's okay. First and foremost, I want to give a shout out to everyone on this call. Oh, briefly, one moment. Sorry, I want to give a shout out to everyone on this call who has been a part of this amazing endeavor. I want to give a huge shout out to the California Coalition, the End Slavery in California Act Coalition. I also want to pay homage and respect to one of the most amazing human beings and legislators that I've ever known here out of the state of California. She is now United States Congresswoman Sydney Kamlager-Dove. She picked this bill up last year when it was ACA 3, and she championed it starting off as a California State Assembly member. She then was elected to the California State Senate, and now she is a United States Congresswoman. I also want to give a huge shout out to, again, another United States Congresswoman, Representative Nikema Williams out of Georgia. And I just want to say, thank you so very much, because just like back in the 1800s, right, 16, 17, 1800s, when slavery was ever so pervasive in a different form, there were so many Black women that were at the forefront of this fight that did not get their rightful respect and kudos. And so I want to thank them all. And I also want to thank all of the 193 plus United States representatives who are currently supporting our federal efforts of the Abolition Amendment. And so I just want to say thank you all so very much. Continue to be the voice of the people, continue to champion and move forward, and we will live in a United States where slavery no longer exists.
Thank you very much, Sister Jamelia. I guess my final comments would start with happy birthday to my daughter, Kimberly. Today is her birthday. Daddy's trying to make you proud. We should all be proud of ourselves, not just those who are here now, but the many, many all across the country who have collectively made these things possible. This is incredibly epic. We have changed 7 state constitutions since 2018 on it with a grassroots organization. There were times when we were working where our budget was, I owe you money. That was our budget, and we still managed to get it done. And we're going to continue to get it done. The wins since 2024 just keep pouring in. New Hampshire passed their committee 20-0 unanimously. Kentucky has submitted a joint resolution, and it looks like their first committee may be the same thing, unanimous. We also are scheduled to meet with the Congress, with the City Council in Washington, D.C. in a couple of days, where D.C. will put together a resolution in support of the Abolition Amendment. This is going to be happening throughout the year as we move forward, committee after committee, passing unanimously, and we are proud to be a part of all of this and to know that we're living in a generation where we could finally see the end of legalized slavery. Not metaphoric slavery, not 9-to-5 slavery, but literal legalized slavery where people are hunted and captured and sold on the open market. And I'm just proud to be a part of this along with all of you. And with that being said, I will go ahead and pass off to Brother Nathan, who will finish off with final comments and his perspectives. You're on mute, Nathan.
All right. I just also want to thank everybody here and everybody who's involved in this movement and is continuing to move it forward. What I would like to ask as a call to action, things that you can do, 4 things. Number 1, go to our website, www.abolishslavery.us. Look particularly at the resource page and read about the exception clause and slavery and involuntary servitude, and understand, so that you can understand what's happening on this issue. You're doing it by being here today, but continue to learn about the issue. Second, to support the movement, you can support ASNN financially. The easiest way to do that is the donation page on our website, and you can also support campaigns in your own states. And that's the third thing, to be involved in abolition campaigns in your own state, whether that's to get rid of an exception clause or whether that's to add abolition language in states that don't have that in the Constitution yet. And then also after the abolition amendment passes, there's still need to do legal work to help put this into practice and actually identify the badges and incidents of slavery, what's actually going on, and to end those practices. It'll also be important if we have a federal amendment, and that's another thing to follow, is what's happening at the federal level. If we get a federal amendment at some point, it'll have to be, as Dennis said, it has to be ratified in all the states. So there will be state level work that'll have to happen again then. So stay engaged at your state level on this issue. And then finally, fourth, tell everybody else that you know about this issue. So many people don't even realize that there is slavery and involuntary servitude in our nation today. So let them know what's going on, share these resources with them, and thank you, because if we keep this up, we will be able to actually abolish slavery and involuntary servitude in this country once and for all. Max?
Thank you very much, Brother Nathan. We are finishing up now for our presentation. We appreciate everybody who has come here to view this. We're not quite done yet. We got something special for you to close it all out with. And we are going to start to go into that now. As was said by Nathan, please visit our website at abolishslavery.us. Consider being a monthly donor to help keep this going, because it's going to take us some time and some resources to achieve this, and a lot of dedication. And we hope that you will share in that dedication with us. Thank you once again. Peace.
May of 1865, William Lloyd Garrison moved at its convention for the disbanding of the American Anti-Slavery Society on the grounds that the passage of the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery by Congress in February of 1865 and its certain ratification by a sufficient number of states, the abolition of slavery was now in sight and the goal of the organization reached. Frederick Douglass, prophetically in a response speech the next day, said, in effect, "Not so fast. The job of the abolitionist is not done." Here is a portion of his speech read by the members of the Abolish Slavery National Network in Denver, Colorado, the first state since 1854 to abolish slavery without an exception clause allowing the enslavement as a punishment for a crime.
I do not wish to appear here in any fault-finding spirit or as an impugner of the motives of those who believe that the time has come for society to disband. I am conscious of no suspicion of the purity and excellence of the motives that animate the president of this society, William Lloyd Garrison, and other gentlemen who are in favor of its disbanding. I take this ground. whether this constitutional amendment, the 13th, is law or not, whether it has been ratified by a sufficient number of states to make it law or not, I hold that the work of abolitionists is not done.
Even if every state in the Union had ratified that amendment, while the black man is confronted in the legislation of the South by the word white, our work as abolitionists, as I conceive it, is not done. I took the ground last night that the South, by unfriendly legislation, could make our liberty under that provision a delusion, a mockery, and a snare, and I hold that ground now. What advantage is a provision like this amendment to the black man if the legislature of any state can tomorrow declare that no black man's testimony shall be received in a court of law? Where are we then?
Any wretch may enter the house of a black man and commit any violence he pleases. If he happens to do it only in the presence of black persons, he goes unwhipped of justice. And don't tell me that those people down there have become so just and honest all at once that they will not pass laws denying to black men the right to testify against white men in the courts of law. Why? Our northern states have done it. Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio have done it.
Here, in the midst of institutions that have gone forth from old Plymouth Rock, the black man has been excluded from testifying in the courts of law. And if the legislature of every 7 states tomorrow pass a law declaring that no Negro shall testify in any courts of law, they will not violate that provision of the Constitution. Such laws exist now at the South, and they might exist under this provision of the Constitution, that there shall be neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime in any state of the Union.
Slavery is not abolished until the black man has the ballot. While the legislatures of the South retain the right to pass laws making any discrimination between black and white, slavery still lives there. As Edmund Quincy once said, while the word white is on the statute book of Massachusetts, Massachusetts is a slave state. While the black man can be turned out of a car in Massachusetts, Massachusetts is a slave state. While the slave can be taken from old Massachusetts, Massachusetts is a slave state. That is what I heard Edmund Quincy say 23 or 24 years ago. I never forgot such a thing.
Now, while the black man can be denied a vote, while the legislatures of the South can take from him the right to keep and bear arms, as they can, they would not allow a Negro to walk with a cane where I came from. They would not allow 5 of them to assemble together. The work of the abolitionists is not finished. Notwithstanding the provision in the Constitution of the United States that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be abridged, the black man has never had the right either to keep or bear arms, and the legislatures of the state will still have the power to forbid it under this amendment.
They carry on a system of unfriendly legislation. And will they not do it? Have they not got prejudice there to do with it? Think you that because they are for the moment in the talons of the beak and our glorious eagle, instead of the slave being there, as formerly, that they are converted? I hear of the loyalty at Wilmington, the loyalty at South Carolina. What is it worth? Not a straw. They are loyal while they see 200,000 sable soldiers with glistening bayonets walking in their midst.
But let the civil power of the South be restored, and the old prejudices and hostility to the Negro will revive. The very fact that the Negro has been used to defeat this rebellion and strike down the standards of the Confederacy will be a stimulus to all their hatred, to all their malice, and lead them to legislate with a greater stringency towards this class than ever before.
The American people are bound by their sense of honor. I hope by their sense of honor, at least by a just sense of honor, to extend the franchise to the Negro. I was going to say that the abolitionists of the American Anti-Slavery Society were bound to stand still and see the salvation of God until that work is done. Where shall the black man look for support, my friends, if the American Anti-Slavery Society fails?
From whence shall we expect a certain sound from the trumpet of freedom, when the old pioneer, when his society that has survived mobs and martyrdom and the combined efforts of priestcraft and statecraft to suppress it shall all at once subside on the mere intimation that the Constitution has been amended so that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime, shall hereafter be allowed in this land?
What did the slaveholders of Richmond say to those who objected to arming the Negro on the ground that it would make him a free man? Why, they said, the argument is absurd. We may make these Negroes fight for us, but while we retain the political power of the South, we can keep them in their subordinate positions. That was the argument, and they were right. They might have employed the Negro to fight for them, and while they retained in their hands power to exclude him from political rights, they could have reduced him to a condition similar to slavery.
They would not call it slavery, but some other name. Slavery has been fruitful in giving itself names. It has been called the peculiar institution, the social system, and the impediment, as it was called by the General Conference of the Methodist Episcopal Church. It has been called by a great many names, and it will call itself by yet another name. And you and I and all of us had better wait and see what new form this old monster will assume, and what new skin this old snake will come forth. Frederick Douglass, May 1865.